A political sea change, a vast cultural shift that is impacting across the region. Turkey is now looking to become a model for the future of the Middle East.
We no longer consider any nation as an enemy or as a threat.
After a decade in power, the Islamic-leaning government is presenting the nation as progressive, democratic, secular, pro-Western.
Turkey appears much more of a model to be emulated and a country that is supporting people against repressive governments.
Turkey never wants to establish an empire again, but there is some rediscovery of Ottoman identity.
The Justice and Development AK Party has overhauled the nation's social fabric, the economy, and its whole foreign policy. But old questions of human rights remain.
The right to organize, freedom of expression has been worsening.
I traveled from Istanbul, once the capital of the Ottoman Empire, to the city of Ankara, the secular capital and the seat of Turkish politics. I wanted to examine whether the Turkish experience would work for their Middle Eastern neighbors. Turkey, the bridge between Europe and Asia, a country with deep ties to the East and an important strategic ally for the West. Turkey has one of the fastest growing and largest economies in the Muslim world.
Since the foundation of modern Turkey, its foreign policy has been in tune with the West. But in the past 3 years, there has been significant shift toward the Muslim world. The question is simple. Is Turkey dreaming of returning to glorious era of Ottoman Empire?
It's about a new space of influence, and certainly the Ottoman geography, what the foreign ministers call strategic depth, historical depth, and geographic depth, gives Turkey a new role.
The architect behind the foreign policy changes was the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, the former policy advisor to Prime Minister Erdogan.
So he's an idealist. He's totally he follows somewhat of a moralpolitik, which has a very pragmatic side as well, because Turkey's foreign policy is based on these ideals plus business interests.
He's one of the brightest foreign minister you can find in the world today. I think he's a man of vision.
Thank you.
Davutoglu achieved a smooth rise from an academic to a top politician. His strategic depth doctrine became a roadmap for the government in foreign policy. He came up with his ideas here at Istanbul's Beykent University when he was head of the Department of International Relations. Ensar Nishanji worked with him.
This is very popular in Turkey, and this is the mind map of Davutoglu. This is very, very important.
So he influenced Turkish foreign policy in the past year profoundly.
Yeah, he influenced very much now.
So if somebody asks Mr. Davutoglu, are you a Turk or are you a Muslim, how he define himself?
It's a synthesis, but I think he's first Muslim, then he's a Turk.
When he came to office in 2009, he put relations with other Islamic countries at the very top of his agenda.
Turkey pursues a multifaceted, proactive, constructive and vision-oriented foreign policy. We aim to contribute to the improvement of security, stability and welfare both in our close neighborhood and beyond.
We no longer consider any nation as an enemy or as a threat. We believe that our mutual and bilateral and multilateral relationship with various countries in the region is based on mutual interest, mutual trust, respect.
It's a recalibration of Turkey's role. For so long during the Cold War, Turkey had nothing to do with the Middle East, had nothing to do with its fellow Muslim citizens of the region. They focused exclusively on the West. Now Turkey is coming back to its more natural place.
Many attribute the growing popularity of Prime Minister Erdogan in the region to Davutoglu's zero problem with neighbors policy. Erdogan traveled to Middle Eastern countries and increased cultural and trade ties. At the time, Western countries were crippled by financial crisis. Turkey opened up the Middle East market to its businessmen.
This is in addition to our traditional allies in Europe and the United States. There has been remarkable progress. Couple of, for example, concrete examples. Our trade volume has increased with almost all of our neighbors. We have lifted visas with a number of countries, and that has enabled our citizens to travel around the world, and also the citizens of other countries to come and visit Turkey.
When Turkey opened up, embassies in 17 new countries in Africa, the reason is that Turkish businessmen invest in those African countries. Then the Turkish, foreign ministry opens a consulate in Nairobi, and then the Turkish airlines start to fly there from Istanbul. So these things, this is just a pattern which just began. And when you go to the Istanbul airport, you see planes flying to cities that sometimes you never heard before.
Many buses that came from the West Bank to Jerusalem were full of dynamite.
One of the defining moments in Turkey's foreign policy was in Davos 3 years ago, when Erdogan walked out on the Israeli President Shimon Peres over the blockade of Gaza. Since then, relations between the two old allies have deteriorated. But it made Erdogan a hero overnight in the Arab world.
There was always this almost conflict between Turkish foreign policy vis-à-vis Israel and national sentiment. And so Erdogan, for the first time in many, many years, was able to almost capture the spirit of the Turkish street, and certainly of the Arab street. And suddenly he was more popular because of that than any Arab leader.
But suddenly, Turkey's open-door policy was put to a severe test. In December 2010, the Arab Spring began to blossom. The fast chain of events was a surprise for the Turkish leadership.
But I think particularly in the last year, as we've seen country after country have problems. How can you have zero problems with your neighbors when your neighboring countries are at war with each other? They were one of the first countries to call for Mubarak and Egypt to leave, but that's also because there was animosity between Prime Minister Erdogan and President Mubarak. It was very easy to do that. When Libya happened, when Syria happened, Turkey was much slower in changing its position. And now there's questions in the Arab world about Turkey's credibility.
I certainly felt very disappointed that he took so long to react. He continued to call Assad a reformer.
The relationship between the Turkish government and Bashar's regime was very strong, and it took almost 8 months for the current Turkish government to start changing.
Turkey was eventually forced to take sides. Erdogan captured the moment and supported the Arab uprising. Tariq Ramadan is an Egyptian scholar and the grandson of the founder of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood.
When you look at the region, it's not a domino effect, it's a chess game. We have to deal with the geostrategy. And to think that the Americans and even the European countries are not involved, they are not talking, they just look at the Turkish government saying, oh, you are now quite powerful and we are dealing with you, are looking at what you are doing as spectators. That's completely wrong. There are agreements between the Turkish government and the American government, that's for sure.
Does the United States support Erdogan? I think they have no choice but to support Erdogan because there's no one else to support. In many ways, the AK Party represented exactly what America wanted to see in the Middle East. It was a Muslim majority party that represented conservative values, but seemed to be aspiring towards a secular, stable Middle East because they focus more on economic, pragmatic interests than the Islamic ideology.
You are here facing something which will have an impact on the future of the region. Not only because you are talking about Syria and Iran and the relationship with Israel, it's also about the relationship between Shia and Sunni.
More than 90% of Turkish population are Muslim, and majority of them are Sunni Muslim. But their neighbor Iran is Shia Muslim. These two countries, along their long history, they have been in competition with one another during Ottoman sultans and Iranian kings.
Turkey's relations with Iran have taken a nosedive since the Syrian uprising. It's mainly because Turkey has helped to regroup the Syrian opposition in Istanbul. And this is posing a threat to Iran's closest ally, the Syrian president Bashar Assad, who himself is an Alawi Shia. Osman Logoglu is deputy leader of Turkey's main opposition party and a former ambassador to Washington.
According to the views in Washington and in Europe, Iran is a country that is threatening the region with its nuclear program, with its influence over the Shiite communities in all the countries, especially in Iraq. The views of the West about the Iranian danger coincides with the wish of AKP, especially desire of the Turkish Prime Minister, to become a leader of the Muslim world. Okay, so it is like against the Shiite crescent, managed, directed by Iran, you create another front of Sunni states led by Turkey. This is an extremely dangerous scenario for the region.
There is no doubt that Iran, certainly in the last decade, has played a very negative role in the Arab world because, like Israel, the other power in the region that is non-Arab, it has overreached. It has overreached in Lebanon, it has overreached in Syria, it has certainly overreached in Iraq. Turkey appears much more of a model to be emulated and a country that is supporting people against repressive governments. That is where the Turks have won, and they have won hearts and minds, not just politics and economic relationships.